Welcome back to Right on Four Corners. I'm your host, DelSheree Gladden. I'm a USA Today bestselling author with over 30 published novels and a ninth grade English teacher. I'm happy to talk with Geoff Habiger, who's been so great to send so many books and authors our way. Geoff, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Geoff Habiger. I'm the senior editor, owner / do-it-all for Artemisia Publishing. We're a small independent publishing company located in the Albuquerque area.
Thank you for chatting with me today. As our listeners have heard, we've been talking to some of the San Juan College theater students who have been writing and then putting together their plays. And we're recording this on December 13th, so their plays are being performed tonight, which is what brings you into town, right? So tell us about your connection to this project.
I'm excited to be here to see these plays. Early part of the semester, the teacher for the theater class, Eric, contacted me mostly because the plays are going to be put on in the Connie Gotch Theater here on campus, and we have a connection with Connie. We published 3 of her books back in the day and had worked with her when she was doing Right on Four Corners. Interview several of our authors as well. And Eric wanted to make a connection. He had talked to me about this was the first theater class that he had been able to put on and teach here on campus. And he wanted to do something special and to take the plays that the students are writing and directing and producing and get those published. He wanted to know if I was interested. And I thought about it for a few seconds and then said yes. So
Well, and it's such an interesting part of publishing. I don't really know a whole lot about. I have a friend who I don't even know what to call it. He has a company interested in putting his play in one of their services that people choose from. And so that's been kind of cool to learn a little bit about that. So tell us, what does that mean for Artemisia to have these plays available to people?
Basically what it means is we're going to take the plays as written by each of the students. We're just going to put them into a book format so that we can then make it available to anybody else who wants to read them, who maybe wants to produce them and put them on themselves. But it's also just something that the students will have as a way to remember their experience in class and the experience of putting these on. Hopefully it's a very positive experience for all of them.
Resume builder, something to put on.
Always a good thing, yes.
Well, and this class has sounded like it's been really interesting for the students to just do everything in really short form and kind of seems like a little bit of a frantic pace, but
it does. I heard the interview that Eric did here with KSJE, talking with him as well. His process sounds exceedingly interesting, very in-depth, very immersive, but also a very quick pace to it. Mm-hmm. But it sounds like the students are jumping right into it and are enjoying the process that he has. He says that these are some of the best plays that he's ever had from doing this kind of a course for, which is kind of cool here. And I've read through them and I find them very fascinating and interesting, such creative minds, and I'm looking forward to see them actually put on tonight.
When Eric first contacted me, we've got these plays and I work with ninth graders. There's such a range in student work of what you're going to get. Yes. Even just been grading essays all week, and it's like handwriting that I can barely decipher and disconnected thoughts up to something that I'm like, oh, wow, it's actually really insightful and well put together and good job. So it really, really runs the gamut. And reading these ones, they were a lot of fun because there's so much variety in them. I think that must at least partially come from his approach of they have to pull components, I guess, out of a hat, basically.
Yeah.
It's like, this is what your play is going to be about. Now go write it.
Yeah. Which, honestly, I love that approach. If I ever actually taught like a creative writing class, I would probably do the same thing and just say, no, you don't get to choose what you write. Here, pull from a hat, now write something.
Yeah.
Because that really gets you into the creative process, as well as it's more to show you the development of, do you understand the skill sets that go into whatever project, task, or whatever. So.
Well, and it was kind of interesting working with my students. There's so much education theory that doesn't really ever come into play in practice, it seems like. And there's so much offering choice, and that gives them power over their education. Or they freeze up and then they do absolutely nothing. Like, I've had that occur a few times recently. Okay, no, you haven't decided? Well, here's what you are doing.
Yeah.
Here's your thesis. Here's your topic. Just go. So I like that of just get in and get it started. How many writers stare at that blank screen or blank page and don't get things done?
I'm raising my hand. Sometimes that happens.
Yeah.
I think every writer has ever faced that kind of writer's block before. Mm-hmm. Even if you write all the time, you still face it. Having the prompts that Eric has done in class to prompt them and to give them, you need to have this this setting, this number of characters, this prop, whatever it might be, really sounds like it really challenged each of the students.
And really came up with some fun ideas that probably wouldn't have been something you'd thought to include normally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
some random stuff that is like, oh, well, that's how that works.
Yeah.
So, okay, we'll throw it in there. I think it'd be interesting. My fiance and I have talked a few times, future plans, doing something in publishing and the process of selecting books and me being in teaching and going back and forth between our ideas of like what we like to read and what we would classify as what we'd want to publish or something like that. And thinking about doing it. What a lot of people I think really need is like some sort of mentorship program when they're new to writing and publishing. Because it's hard to find that. Like even, you can take a creative writing class, you can join a writer's group, but to have that like long-term development of your writing with someone who's been doing it for a long time, like it's not something you see a lot anymore. I think that was more of a relationship back in the day with like you'd have an established editor that you worked with over years, and it's hard to invest that type of time and money.
And there's a few that still work that way, and several that if you're an author who is, I don't want to say lucky enough, but who has been able to get an agent and then work with an editor at a larger house, develop that kind of relationship. But at the same time, editors move around all the time these days. Just as much as many writers do many different things, most writers will do traditional, some of them also do self-published or combinations thereof. And being able to develop that kind of mentorship or that kind of dynamic to be able to bounce ideas off of each other, to develop talent, to work on your skill sets is both a good thing, but it's also something that is not as prevalent maybe these days.
It's been a while since I read the article about it, so I might get some of the details wrong, which I'm sure my listeners are used to because I always forget to look stuff up beforehand. I think it was Malcolm Gladwell. It was talking about a future book he's planning to release, and he'd gone with a new publisher. And so everybody, what happened? What's going on? And one of the people contributing their thoughts was like, well, his editor's gone. Like, that might be the main reason.
Oh, yeah.
I think he retired or something. It's like, if you're going to make a change after you've been with the same publishers for your entire career, might as well do it when you're like, well, I got to work with someone new anyway. So.
Well, yeah, and editors do retire or they move on or, whatever it may be. Sometimes, though, it's a matter of authors these days have to be writing a lot. And so I know plenty of authors who might work with an agent who then sells a book to publisher A. They also need to put out another book that same year. Most publishers only publish one book a year with an author, so they have to go to publisher B. That might mean working with a different editor. That sort of thing happens all the time. Plenty of authors, people that I read all the time, can see, you look at the book, who published it, and, oh, that's a different company.
Yeah. Well, and how long have you been working with? I guess, how long has Artemisia been a thing?
This year is our 20th year. We have been a thing for 20 years. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but we've been a thing for 20 years. And this past year has been our busiest year. Next year, our 21st year, will be our busiest year on top of that. We have 22 books scheduled next year.
Well, hopefully it just all goes smoothly and there's no other crazy things that happen with paper supplies and distributors.
Fingers
all
crossed.
Kinds of things.
So, yeah.
It's like last year was an especially weird year in publishing, just all the way around.
Not too bad. Better than 2020 with COVID year. That one was kind of a weird year. So.
Well, and I believe you guys weren't affected by, again, the distributor that abruptly shut down and left people stranded. You guys worked with someone else.
No, we're not affected by them, or there was another distributor just past month who announced that they were having to close their doors. So I'm blessed in the sense that I've got picked up with a fairly large distributor, and they actually are absorbing some of the people that were affected by those two distribution channels that were closed. So
I was going to ask you, kind of over the 20 years you've been doing this, what are some of the biggest changes that you've seen in publishing that maybe regular readers and everybody might not really be aware of?
The biggest change, honestly, has been the shakeup. It started with ebooks, because we started back before the idea of what a Kindle was. It started by Amazon and how it developed. Those didn't exist. That's why we became a publishing company. So ebooks started it, and then the development of self-publishing. I think that's been the biggest, I wouldn't call it a change, but just biggest thing that has happened to the publishing industry is the ability of somebody to write a book and decide, I don't want to try and get an agent. I don't want to try and find a publisher. I'm just going to put it out there myself. And to be able to put it out there and then sell it and make money doing it has probably been the biggest change. And I think it's something that the big publishers are still trying to adjust to.
Yeah, it seems like it. I haven't kind of stayed in touch very much over the last couple months because I've been drowning in homework for licensing classes. But when I was trying to pay better attention, there was a lot of talk in just amongst different podcasts and publications that I read of so many publishers that are still really struggling to wrap their head around how to reach audiences now, because there's so much more competition with self-publishing, more small presses and hybrids and all kinds of things, that it's changed the way people find books, for one, and people can get so narrowed in on their reading preferences. Like they can only like to read vampire historical romances set in New England in 1830s, and there's 1,000 books they can choose from that will keep them busy for a long time. And it's like how these bigger companies try to navigate that. And it's really interesting to see how some publishers have kind of shifted toward brand loyalty marketing. I think I've seen a lot with Penguin really focuses on that, to where it's like most people don't really think about which publisher is publishing the books that they're reading. So I think that's an interesting approach to try to get people to be like, no, I like Penguin, so I'm going to read their books. And others are trying different ways of getting more celebrities to link up their brand with well-known names and different things like that. And it doesn't seem like anyone's really settled on what is effective in the new publishing environment.
I don't know if anybody knows what's effective these days. When you think something is working, say just a few years ago, social media was, we've got to be doing social media, we've got to be doing these kinds of things. And then all of a sudden TikTok comes along and book talk becomes a thing. And all of a sudden obscure books that nobody seems to know anything about become bestsellers because somebody on book talk with 1,000, 2,000, 20,000 followers is promoting it, everybody's buying it. And then you find the big publishers then trying to chase that. I think that's one of the problems, is that they're chasing trends, marketing, and else, and that's just hard to do. You can never chase a trend. So
well, that's always something that throughout the time I've been in publishing, which almost as long as you have at this point.
30 books. So.
Just watching some of the changes and listening to like agents talk about it and different publishers. You'll read things, you'll listen to interviews and podcasts and things like that. And I always find it really interesting, like how out of touch they seem with, if you get outside of the literary circle of books. Book Riot, I haven't listened to them in a while, but they're one that it's like, if you want to know what's going on in like the top of publishing in that like way too small circle of we all agree on what's good and what's not good and we make the decisions on things, it's like, yeah, they all seem to agree within that circle,
but if you get outside of that circle,
they seem to have no idea what's going on, and like they don't really seem to get a lot of just like regular normal readers.
No, they seem to miss that. And I see it too. I've spoken with some authors, fairly well-known authors who have big followings, and publishers that they've worked with for years are not understanding who they are anymore, or are making announcements or pronouncements about particular author's series without consulting the author. The author finds out, wait a minute, what do you mean that's my last book in the series? I have more books that I want to write. And so that kind of stuff is happening too. And bigger publishers are, I won't say chasing, but they're going after, they're trying to establish on brand name of certain authors and using that and to then move to try and support again the other authors within their catalog, but the shares of the pie seem to get smaller at times.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's been a few years now since I was in my master's program, but one of the classes I took was like on the history of publishing, and it was really interesting to see how it had evolved from like, I think it covered like the mid 1800s ish up until like the early 2000s, and how they had tried to adapt and change to different social patterns and interests and whatnot, and how they were always like a little bit behind and things would get a little worse, and then they'd try to change to the new thing and just couldn't really ever catch up or get ahead, and how it had developed into this publishing model of we have to find the one, maybe two if we're lucky, books that will support everything else we do. And so it's, going after the celebrity memoir or the political whoever did what thing.
Oh, yeah.
And it was like, even as I'm reading it, well, that doesn't seem very sustainable in the long run.
No.
And it's not.
What I think is interesting about the history of publishing, if you go back and look at publishing in the 19th century, a lot of books around that time that came out, they were initially serialized in magazines or a newspaper and then put together as a book. Or a lot of them were subscribed to. The author would go out and get subscriptions from people to buy the book when it came out. And then they would have a ready-made set of people that were already guaranteed to buy the book, which reminds me now we've come full circle because now we have Kickstarter.
Yeah, I was just thinking, That sounds a lot like early Kickstarter.
Yeah, and so that kind of thing happened, the fact that we've kind of come around full circle. And you see that a lot these days, a lot of well-known authors doing Kickstarters.
Mm-hmm.
That sort of thing. Brandon Sanderson did a huge Kickstarter, and one of the biggest ever, but his name's Brandon Sanderson. So, but I mean, that sort of thing is interesting because you would think Brandon Sanderson wouldn't have to do a Kickstarter, but he did for a particular, I forget which book it was, but.
My mind's totally blanking too. So. But yeah, there's been a couple that I've seen do some really successful Kickstarters with special edition covers or the earlier books in the series with the newest one that's coming out, creativity that authors are taking on and small presses, anything basically, I guess, outside of the big five, where it's like, you have to do the majority of the work yourself. Yeah. There's not really any help. It's hard to establish that fan base. You really got to get creative and be willing to try new things and put in the time and effort and work and money. Yeah. And it can pay off. It's interesting to see that difference in going 1,000% and making that happen. And then you have so many others who give up or get frustrated and or run out of steam or whatever it is. And there's a big divide.
There is. It's fun to see how people do adapt, though, to the changing environment. And everybody, and so many people are trying so many new and creative ways to market themselves, market their books. Even if they're with a bigger publisher, they're always trying new things. A lot of the authors, there's only a handful of authors that don't really need to market. Most people know their names, Stephen King, Patricia Cornwell, these kinds of authors that they don't really need to market them because people will see their titles and buy them just because they've been around for so long. But anybody who is writing something new, that kind of thing. And the problem is that the bigger publishers sometimes don't give bandwidth to books that are just slightly outside of what they think the current trend is. Take fantasy right now. In the fantasy genre, there's a new and upcoming subgenre called cozy fantasy, which is fantasy settings, but I heard it described as things are going really bad, but there's hot chocolate. And, if anybody is familiar with the book Legends and Lattes, it's a cozy fantasy book. And now a lot of the bigger publishers are trying to chase that genre. But that means that somebody who writes something that's slightly different or outside of that norm, or somebody comes along and goes, I have this romantasy. Well, romantasy was last year. I'm sorry. We've moved on. Well, no, there's still a market for romantasy or a market for grimdark or whatever it might be. And the bigger publishers aren't going for those, though. So that's an opportunity for the author to decide, do I self-publish? Do I for a smaller publisher? That sort of thing.
Well, and it's nice that there is more option and choice. I think having fewer gatekeepers always has its pluses and minuses because you do end up with a ton of crap out there. And now AI generated crap to add to that. But
don't get me started. That's an entire podcast.
So. Oh, I know. Yeah, I'm like, I get too much on that, and then and especially talking about students using AI. Whole conference, one of them about that. But it is good to have options and to be able to consider, but that can also be very overwhelming for new authors trying to figure out what path they want to go. I was going to ask you, what advice or tips would you give newer authors who are trying to figure out their path in publishing?
First of all, write the stories that you want to write. Don't chase trends. Don't sit there and go, I'm going to write the next best romantasy or cozy fantasy or whatever it might be. And when that trend might be beyond where, by the time you finish writing the book, the trend could be completely different. So just write what interests you. So start with that. And then you're going to have to do some legwork. You're going to have to look and see what is selling out there, who's selling it. Are the bestsellers that you see on places like Amazon or Bookshop or wherever, are they through a big publisher, traditional publisher? Are they self-published? That sort of thing. And then look at those options to do if your desire is to get published by Simon & Schuster or Tor, Random House or something like that, you're going to have to get an agent. So what's that process to go on, try and get an agent, and then be willing to then wait maybe a year or more on sub? Or are there smaller publishers? Everybody from mid-sized publishers who publish, they might publish 100 books a year, maybe, or even fewer than that, down to small publishers like myself who we're doing 20 books a year or less. So that sort of thing. Then decide also what would you get out of going with a publisher, whether you need an agent or not. Not all publishers require an agent. Some are perfectly happy to work directly with the author. But is self-publishing an option? But knowing what is going to go into self-publishing, because as a self-published author, you are required to do everything. You have to learn how to lay out your book. You have to learn how to market your book. You have to learn how to decide what kind of cover art you're going to get for your book. And there are plenty of options out there and plenty of places that will hire people to do or get advice for, that sort of thing. But you have to make those decisions and understand what the commitments are for each of them.
Well, I think matching up like your goals with your route. Sometimes I'll run into authors where it's like, they write something really niche or, just kind of out there or obscure or whatever. And their goal is like to get it picked up by a big five. And it's like, but nobody's publishing that right now. Like exactly. You do have to fit into their catalog. And the same of like, if you are interested in working with a small press, but you're expecting a, $50,000 marketing budget toward your book release, or it's not going to happen.
Or a large advance or an advance period or anything like that. Part of it, you're right, is coming on what is your goal? Is your goal to have a commercial success? Is your goal to have a literary success, which are two different things?
Very.
Is your goal to just, I have a story, and if I don't get it out, they're going to put me into a mental hospital. I know plenty of authors who write that way too. So what is your goal about the story that you wish to tell? And then once you've done that, who is going to be best able to get that out to people who might be interested in the same kind of story? So.
Yeah, well, I think it's one of the things that most of the publishers that I've been with in the past have been smaller to medium presses. And most of the time, they really kind of zero in on an area or a genre or a style of publishing or whatever that they do well at, that works for them. And that's got to work for the author as well.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Some small presses really go after bookstores and events and tours and being in the community, where others are more focused on online, digital, all of that. And so it's, I think, really taking that time to get to know who you're trying to approach with whatever you've got. Does that make sense?
Yeah, exactly.
You might have a dream publisher or agent, but if they're not doing what you're doing, it's not going to work.
And, so to that end, authors should do their research, look at the different publishers, look at what they've published. Where can you find those published books? Can you only find them on Amazon, or can you find them on different, platforms and everything? If you go to a bookstore and ask them, can they find it in a distributor's catalog? Or whatever. If you go to a Barnes and Noble or wherever, do they have it in there? Whether they carry it in stock or not doesn't matter, but do they know about the book? That sort of thing, because that's going to tell you a lot about the press and how they operate, that sort of thing. But then ask questions, contact the press. Most of them should have an email or a way to contact them, and then ask them questions, whether they're open to subs or not at the time. At least ask them the questions. So, and because then you can find out, are they a good fit or not? So,
maybe you might have something in the future, even if your current project doesn't work out.
Yeah.
I think the more you know, and just learning more about the industry in general, really help you avoid some mistakes or unfortunate relationships.
Yeah, and there are good resources out there. The Authors Guild provides a lot of resources for authors to understand about the industry, about some of the legal aspects. They provide things like sample contracts, or they provide free legal advice as well on contracts, which is useful for people. There's I think it's a website, but I know it's also a blog that's the Writer Beware site that provides a lot of information about predatory or nefarious people out there who promise the sky and don't deliver a thing. So so using those resources as well. If you can, if you're wanting to look at a particular publisher and you find out who else is published by them, find their website, find them on social media. Not everybody is on social media, but most authors will have a way to contact them. And then ask them and say, hey, I see you're published by them. What's your experience? It doesn't hurt to do that ahead of time, or if you're starting to make that connection with a particular publishing house, ask them, can I contact some of your other authors?
Yeah, most authors, I'm happy to share their knowledge and their experiences.
Especially if they're native.
Well, yeah, unfortunately, yes. But that'll be the first thing that'll come up in like author groups or somebody contacted me from this.
Yeah.
People will definitely share their opinions. So I think just getting to know the people involved with publishing at whatever level you're interested in and start to make those contacts. It's a great community overall. There's always, the one or two that maybe spoil the bunch, but generally I love the publishing community. People help each other a ton.
Most of the people I know are very open and very helpful and willing to help. Luckily, I've met mostly good eggs. So.
Good. Well, we're getting close to time to wrap up, but I did want to ask you, give us some idea of what we should keep an eye out for next year with your schedule. Sounds like there's a lot.
There's a lot. Next year is probably our biggest year. It's a mix of a lot of mysteries, a lot of middle grade titles. We love our middle grade fiction, so that's always fun. A lot of some sci-fi coming out and a few other things as well. I wrote it down the other day when we had 20 titles, and I just signed contracts in the past couple of weeks for 2 more. And it's a good mix of things. Almost all of it is fiction this year, and looking forward to having all of these books coming out. So.
Oh, good. Well, look forward to having more of your authors on the show and getting to know their stories. I really enjoyed being able to work with you and get to know a lot of your authors. I've made friends with a lot of them over social media, and we stay in contact and get to see what everybody's doing on Facebook and stuff.
That's good to know.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to come in and talk with me today. Tell us before you go, where can people find you and your books and everything about Artemisia?
You can search for us online, Artemisia Publishing. The best thing is if you go to our website, apbooks.net, and you can find information about us, about all of the books that we're publishing, and our information that we have for both booksellers as well as for authors.
Thank you so much, and we'll put the link to the website in the show notes as well, so people can check it out really easy. But yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to come in, and we're excited for the play project and everything else you got going on.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to next year.